The HOA president called the cops on me for cleaning my own solar panels. Big mistake. She had no idea I'm the circuit court judge who could dismantle her entire corrupt operation with one ruling. There I was, 6:17 on a Saturday morning, balanced on my ladder with a squeegee, when suddenly, whoop whoop, police sirens shattered the suburban calm. 2 squad cars rolled into my driveway, gravel crunching under their tires like broken bones. I climbed down slowly, cleaning solution still dripping from my hands, and watched 2 officers step out with that familiar hand-on-hip stance. Behind them, HOA President Brenda Kessler stood by her white BMW like she'd just conquered a small country, arms crossed, practically glowing with vindication. The morning dew made everything sparkle except her cold smile. What she didn't know? For 3 months, I'd been quietly building a case against her financial schemes. Her little power trip just became my smoking gun. What would you do if someone weaponized police against you in your own yard? Drop your state below. I'll tell you if your HOA laws are as broken as ours were. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name is Marcus Thornfield, and 6 months ago I was living what most people would call the American dream. If your version involves 23 years of being a circuit court judge, banging gavels, and dealing with the worst humanity has to offer. I specialized in civil rights and property law, the kind of cases that either restore your faith in justice or make you want to become a hermit. But life changes fast when cancer walks through your door. My wife Sarah got diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years ago, and suddenly those late nights reviewing precedents didn't matter as much as holding her hand during chemo sessions. The antiseptic smell of hospital corridors became more familiar than my mahogany chambers, and watching her fight for her life put everything in perspective. When Sarah beat it, because my wife is tougher than overcooked brisket, we decided to start fresh. I took early retirement at 52, and we moved to Willowbrook Estates. Picture-perfect suburbia. Tree-lined streets where your biggest worry should be whether the neighbor's sprinkler system is watering the sidewalk again. Sarah needed accessibility modifications during recovery. I built a beautiful wooden ramp to our front door, solid oak construction that met every ADA requirement and cost me $3,200 in materials. The sound of Sarah's wheelchair wheels rolling smoothly up that ramp every evening was music to my ears. Our rescue German Shepherd Rex would patrol beneath it like a furry security guard while our daughter Emma played guitar on the porch during college breaks. The solar panels came next. 36 gleaming panels that could power our entire house and slice our electric bill from $340 to $12 a month. I researched for months, got proper city permits, hired licensed contractors. The soft hum of clean energy conversion was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. That's when I met Brenda Kessler. Picture a woman who measures grass height with an actual ruler and treats HOA bylaws like sacred scripture. Brenda had been president for 6 years, ever since moving here from some upscale development where being a real estate agent apparently qualified her to micromanage everyone's existence. Her white BMW with luxury living plates prowled the neighborhood like a patrol car, hunting for violations. The first citation appeared within hours. Bright yellow paper that crackled like autumn leaves when I unfolded it. Aesthetic violation of architectural standards, fine, $150. The ramp got hit the next day. Unpermitted structural modification, fine, $150. I walked over to clear things up, thinking reasonable people could work this out. Found Brenda measuring her neighbor's mailbox height with a tape measure. Apparently, Mrs. Chen's decorative mailbox was 3 inches too tall for community standards. Mr. Thornfield, Brenda said, consulting her clipboard like it contained nuclear launch codes, this community has standards. We can't have people installing whatever they want. Everything's properly permitted, I explained patiently. The ramp meets ADA requirements and the panels comply with all city codes. Her smile could have frozen hot coffee. The architectural committee will review your request, but these modifications significantly impact property values. Here's what I didn't know yet. Brenda's architectural committee hadn't met in 2 years. She was making decisions solo, targeting whoever didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. Mrs. Chen's garden decorations were culturally inappropriate. The Thompson family's American flag was too large, but somehow board treasurer Bob Hendricks's unpermitted hot tub never got a citation. HOA architectural committees must follow their own bylaws and document decisions. If there's no committee meeting, there's no valid approval process. One sentence takeaway: always demand to see architectural committee meeting minutes. Many HOAs violate their own procedures to target specific residents. That night, Sarah and I sat on our illegal ramp, listening to the gentle whir of our solar panels doing exactly what they were designed to do. Rex sprawled across the warm wood planks, tail thumping contentedly. "She seems delightful," Sarah said, her sarcasm sharp enough to cut glass. I had no idea I was about to get a PhD in how petty power corrupts absolutely. Brenda didn't waste time making her move. 3 days after our little mailbox measuring encounter, I found another yellow notice taped to my door. This one had official letterhead and fancy legal language that would have impressed me more if I hadn't spent 2 decades reading actual legal documents. Emergency board meeting, flagrant violations discussion, Tuesday 7 p.m., community center. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams when I arrived that Tuesday evening. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting everything in that unflattering office glow that makes everyone look either dead or constipated. Folding chairs squeaked against the linoleum floor as residents filed in, all 12 of them. In a neighborhood of 847 homes, Brenda had managed to pack the meeting with her personal cheering section. Sarah rolled her wheelchair beside me, Emma on her other side for moral support. Rex had to stay home, but honestly, he probably had better judgment than most people in that room. Brenda sat at the head table like she was presiding over the Supreme Court, flanked by her loyal disciples, Bob Hendricks, who spent more on lawn chemicals than most people spend on cars, and Patricia Mills, the neighborhood's unofficial surveillance coordinator. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brenda began, clicking her PowerPoint remote with the authority of a general launching a military campaign, "we're here to address serious violations that threaten our community's standards and property values." The first slide showed my solar panels from 3 different angles, like evidence photos from a crime scene. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. During my years on the bench, I'd seen actual crime scene photos, and trust me, solar panels generating clean energy don't qualify. "These unauthorized installations," she continued with theatrical gravity, "violate our architectural harmony and create visual pollution that impacts every homeowner's investment." Bob Hendricks nodded so vigorously I worried his head might detach and roll across the floor like a bowling ball. "Property values are everything in a community like ours. We can't let individuals make selfish decisions that hurt everyone else." That's rich, coming from a guy whose backyard looked like a chemical processing plant had exploded. But I kept my mouth shut and listened, the way I'd learned to do when defendants were busy digging their own graves in my courtroom. The second slide featured my accessibility ramp, photographed from an angle that made it look like a medieval siege engine. This unpermitted structure represents a safety hazard and unauthorized modification that violates multiple community standards. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, raised a trembling hand. "But it's just a ramp for his wife's wheelchair. Seems fine to me." Patricia Mills leaned forward like a vulture spotting fresh roadkill. "Mrs. Chen, we appreciate your input, but property standards exist for everyone's benefit. We can't make exceptions based on personal circumstances." That's when something clicked in my legal brain. Back in law school, we'd studied a landmark case about HOA procedural violations, boards that ignored their own bylaws to target specific residents. The precedent was crystal clear. Arbitrary enforcement equals harassment. Time for my first counterpunch. "Miss Kessler," I said, standing slowly with the calm confidence that comes from knowing you're about to checkmate someone, "could you please show us the architectural committee meeting minutes where these standards were established?" Her perfectly applied lipstick stretched into what might charitably be called a smile, but her eyes went dead as winter lakes. "The architectural committee operates under established guidelines. I'd like to see the actual meeting minutes," I pressed, pulling out my phone and casually opening the voice recording app. "When did the committee last convene to review applications?" Silence. The kind of silence that falls in a courtroom when a witness realizes they've been caught in a lie. Brenda's fingers drummed against her clipboard like she was typing invisible panic emails. "The committee reviews applications as needed," she finally managed, her voice climbing half an octave. "So you have documentation of recent meetings?" I smiled pleasantly. "Because I've done some research, and I'm curious about the approval process for other modifications around here." I turned to Bob Hendricks. "Bob, when did you get architectural approval for that hot tub installation?" His face cycled through more colors than a mood ring in a blender. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" I asked. "And Patricia, those decorative shutters are lovely. When were those approved?" Patricia suddenly found her fingernails more fascinating than the crown jewels. "Those shutters have been there for years. 2 years, actually. I checked the city permit records. My courtroom smile was probably showing now. Seems like there's some interesting patterns in enforcement around here. Brenda's composure cracked like old sidewalk pavement. Mr. Thornfield, we're not here to discuss other residents. Actually, we absolutely are, I said, letting 23 years of judicial authority creep into my voice. If you're going to cite violations, the enforcement needs to be consistent across all residents. Otherwise, it's just selective harassment disguised as governance. The room went quiet enough to hear Patricia's nervous breathing and Bob's chemical-enhanced grass growing outside. I move for an immediate vote, Brenda announced, clearly rattled and desperate to end this before it got worse. $500 fines for both violations, 30 days to comply or face legal action. The vote was 3-2, with 2 board members smart enough to recognize a sinking ship when they saw one. But as I walked out into the crisp evening air, breathing in the scent of Mrs. Chen's jasmine garden and listening to my phone finish recording, I wasn't worried. I had the entire meeting on audio, and my research had revealed something delicious. Their architectural committee hadn't actually met in over 2 years. Every decision had been Brenda's personal whim. She'd just handed me enough rope to hang her entire operation. She just didn't know it yet. Brenda apparently didn't appreciate being embarrassed in front of her own board because she came back swinging harder than a demolition crew on overtime. 4 days after the meeting, I found a thick legal envelope wedged in my front door, the kind that costs extra postage and makes your heart skip a beat when you see the return address. Hamilton Greystone and Associates. Even the letterhead screamed, "Expensive lawyer who charges for breathing." The cease and desist letter was 3 pages of legal intimidation that would have scared the pants off most homeowners. Lucky for me, I'd written enough court orders to recognize amateur hour when I saw it. The letter demanded immediate removal of both the solar panels and accessibility ramp, threatened property liens, foreclosure proceedings, and warned that all legal fees would be charged to my account. Sarah found me chuckling over my morning coffee as I read it. "Good news, honey?" she asked, rolling her wheelchair up to our kitchen table. "Oh, it's fantastic," I said, waving the letter. Brenda hired a law firm that specializes in real estate transactions to handle HOA enforcement. It's like hiring a baker to perform brain surgery. But Brenda wasn't done flexing her newfound legal muscle. She launched what I can only describe as a neighborhood pressure campaign that would have made a political operative proud. Glossy flyers appeared in every mailbox, warning about certain residents who were undermining property values and community standards. The language was carefully coded, never mentioning names, but somehow everyone knew exactly who she meant. She created a Facebook group called Willowbrook Standards and invited everyone except, naturally, the troublemakers like me and Mrs. Chen. Emma showed me the screenshots, posts about maintaining cultural integrity and protecting the neighborhood from outside influences. The racism was subtle but persistent, like carbon monoxide slowly poisoning the community atmosphere. Meanwhile, I was doing some investigating of my own. Late-night sessions with public records and state databases revealed some fascinating patterns. The HOA hadn't filed required annual reports with the state in 2 years. The pool maintenance company hadn't been paid in 6 months, which explained why our luxury amenity looked like a science experiment growing algae. Most interesting of all, the landscaping budget had mysteriously tripled while the actual work quality had gone downhill faster than a roller coaster. I remembered a case from early in my career, an HOA board in Dallas that got caught embezzling community funds through inflated vendor contracts. The pattern was always the same: create fake emergencies, approve inflated payments to friendly contractors, pocket the difference. It was fraud dressed up as community improvement. The stress was getting to Sarah, though. I'd catch her staring out the window at Brenda's house with worry lines creasing her forehead. The last thing she needed after beating cancer was neighborhood warfare, but she was tougher than titanium and refused to back down. "We're not removing that ramp," she told me one evening as we sat outside listening to the solar panels humming their quiet song of energy independence. "I fought cancer. I can handle one megalomaniac with a clipboard." That's when Brenda made her next move, and it was a doozy. She contacted the city utilities department, claiming my solar panels weren't properly permitted and posed a safety hazard. I was finishing dinner with my family when the doorbell rang, and there stood Jerry Kowalski, city electrical inspector, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. "Sorry to bother you folks," he said, consulting his clipboard with obvious reluctance. "Got a complaint about unpermitted solar installation. Have to do a compliance check." "No problem at all," I said, grabbing my permits file. In my judge days, I'd learned that cooperation with inspectors usually worked better than confrontation. Everything's properly documented. Jerry spent 20 minutes checking connections, reviewing permits, and testing safety systems. The whole time I could see Brenda watching from across the street like a hawk studying a mouse. When he finished, Jerry shook his head and chuckled. "Whoever called this in was either confused or trying to cause trouble," he said. "This is one of the cleanest installations I've seen all year. Meets every code requirement and then some." "Any idea who filed the complaint?" I asked innocently. "Well, I probably shouldn't say, but..." Jerry glanced around and lowered his voice. "Lady across the street there, same one who called about 3 other houses this month. We're starting to think she just doesn't like solar panels." After Jerry left, I stood in my driveway breathing the evening air that carried the scent of Mrs. Chen's night-blooming jasmine. 3 other houses. Brenda was systematically harassing anyone who dared to improve their property without her personal approval. That night, I filed my first formal complaint with the state HOA regulatory board. The paperwork was straightforward. I'd written similar documents hundreds of times from the other side of the bench. Financial mismanagement, selective enforcement, procedural violations, harassment of residents with disabilities. The evidence file was growing thicker by the day. I also reached out quietly to Mrs. Chen and the Thompsons, building a coalition of Brenda's victims. Turned out I wasn't the only one keeping detailed records. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, was a retired paralegal who'd been documenting every interaction since Brenda first targeted her garden decorations. But Brenda wasn't finished escalating. Her next move would be her most vindictive yet, and it would finally give me the smoking gun I needed to destroy her completely. Brenda's desperation was starting to show, and desperate people make stupid mistakes. Her next move was so vindictive it would have been impressive if it wasn't completely insane. It started with a chance encounter at Kroger on a Saturday morning. I was shopping for Sarah's special dietary supplements. Cancer recovery means being extra careful about nutrition, when I literally bumped into Brenda in the produce section. My cart nudged hers while I was reaching for organic spinach, and the bags of overpriced kale in her basket shifted slightly. "Excuse me," I said politely, the way normal human beings do when they accidentally bump into someone. Big mistake. Apparently basic courtesy was all the opening Brenda needed to launch into a lecture about my ongoing violations, right there between the bananas and the bell peppers. Her voice carried across the produce section like she was announcing a fire sale, drawing stares from other shoppers who were just trying to buy groceries in peace. "Mr. Thornfield, you need to understand that your attitude is affecting the entire community," she hissed, clutching her cart handle like she was strangling it. "These violations aren't going away just because you think you're above the rules." I kept my voice calm and level. 23 years of dealing with hostile witnesses had taught me that escalation never helps. "Brenda, everything I've installed is legally permitted and properly documented. If you have specific concerns, we can discuss them through proper channels." "Proper channels?" Her laugh could have curdled the milk in aisle 3. "You mean like hiring expensive lawyers to intimidate hardworking volunteers?" I hadn't hired any lawyers, but pointing that out would have been like trying to reason with a hurricane. "I hope we can work this out reasonably," I said, and started to walk away. That's when she made the fatal mistake that would eventually destroy her. 3 days later, I got a call from Deputy Williams at the sheriff's office, asking if I could come in to discuss a complaint filed against me. When I asked for details, he sounded genuinely confused. "Sir, there's a report here claiming you cornered someone in a grocery store and made threatening statements. The complainant is requesting we investigate possible harassment charges." I nearly laughed out loud. Back when I was presiding over domestic disputes, I'd seen this playbook before. Abusers who called the police on their victims when they fought back. But Brenda had picked the wrong target for her false allegations. "I'll be right there," I told Deputy Williams. "And I assume you'll want to see the security footage from Kroger to verify what actually happened?" Silence on the other end. We hadn't thought of that yet, sir." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the sheriff's office explaining to a very apologetic deputy that grocery store encounters don't typically constitute criminal harassment. The security footage, when they bothered to check it, showed exactly what happened. A brief, polite conversation initiated entirely by the victim. But Brenda wasn't done. While I was dealing with her bogus police report, she was busy organizing a petition to have problematic residents removed from the neighborhood. The language was carefully vague, but the target list was specific. Me, Mrs. Chen, the Thompsons, and anyone else who dared to question her authority. That evening, I decided it was time to dig deeper into Willowbrook's finances. What I found in the public records made my blood pressure spike like a rocket launch. Remember that landscaping budget that had mysteriously tripled? Turns out the company receiving those inflated payments was owned by Brenda's boyfriend, Tyler Manning, a guy whose previous landscaping experience consisted of mowing his own lawn. $47,000 in emergency landscaping consultations over 2 years for work that any competent gardener could have done for a quarter of the price. The documentation was laughably incomplete. Invoices with no itemization, payments approved without board votes, contracts signed without competitive bidding. I'd seen this exact scheme prosecuted in my courtroom before. A city councilman in Fort Worth tried the same trick with road repair contracts and ended up spending 3 years in federal prison. The pattern was always identical. Create fake emergencies, hire friendly contractors at inflated rates, pocket the difference through kickbacks or direct payments. Misses. Chen proved to be an invaluable ally in unraveling this financial web. Her paralegal background meant she knew exactly which documents to request and how to interpret the deliberately confusing accounting. We spent 3 evenings at my kitchen table, spreading papers across the surface like we were planning a military campaign, while Sarah kept us supplied with coffee and her legendary chocolate chip cookies. "Look at this," Mrs. Chen said, pointing to a series of payments with her reading glasses perched on her nose. Same vendor, same amount, approved by the same person every month for 18 months. That's not landscaping. That's money laundering. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed one more piece to make the case ironclad. That's when Brenda handed it to me on a silver platter with her most desperate gambit yet. She filed a formal trespassing complaint with the sheriff's office, claiming that my routine solar panel maintenance required me to trespass on HOA common areas. The logic was so twisted, it belonged in a pretzel factory, but she'd found a technicality. The access route to my roof technically crossed a 6-inch strip of common ground near the property line. Sheriff Martinez called me personally. "Judge Thornfield, I've got the strangest complaint here. Someone wants me to arrest you for trespassing while cleaning your own solar panels." The irony was delicious. Brenda's vindictive overreach was about to trigger the very confrontation that would expose her entire corrupt operation. "Schedule the arrest," I told him, "and make sure there are plenty of witnesses." The arrest was scheduled for 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Brenda's idea of maximum humiliation, catching me in my pajamas when neighbors were heading to work. What she didn't count on was my 23 years of experience handling situations exactly like this. Sheriff's deputies Williams and Rodriguez arrived right on schedule, looking about as enthusiastic as men attending their own funerals. I was already dressed and waiting on my front porch with coffee for everyone, because treating people with respect tends to work better than drama. "Morning, gentlemen," I said, handing them steaming mugs. "Beautiful day for this nonsense, isn't it?" Deputy Williams took a sip and shook his head. "Sir, this is the strangest trespassing complaint I've seen in 15 years. You sure you don't know why someone would file this?" "Oh, I know exactly why," I chuckled. "But let's handle this properly. I assume you need to process me?" The ride to the station was almost comfortable. Rodriguez kept apologizing while Williams muttered about waste of taxpayer resources. When we arrived, the desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork and nearly dropped his pen. "Judge Thornfield, what the hell are you doing here?" And just like that, my carefully maintained cover was blown. "Processing, apparently," I said with a grin. "Though I'd appreciate if we could keep this low-key until I'm ready to make some noise." Deputy Williams's jaw practically hit the linoleum floor. "You're a judge? Why didn't you say something?" "Because I wanted to handle this like any other citizen would," I explained while they processed the paperwork. "No special treatment, no shortcuts, just good old-fashioned constitutional due process." Meanwhile, back at Willowbrook, Brenda was having the time of her life. Sarah later told me she watched from our window as Brenda practically skipped around her driveway, calling people and posting on social media about the criminal element being removed from the neighborhood. She even called the local newspaper. Her golf buddy worked there as a reporter. But here's what Brenda didn't know while she was celebrating her Pyrrhic victory. I wasn't just some quiet retiree who fixed sprinkler systems. I was Marcus Thornfield, 23-year veteran of the circuit court bench, with a specialty in civil rights law and municipal governance. I'd spent over 2 decades defending constitutional property rights, and I knew HOA law better than most attorneys who claimed to specialize in it. More importantly, I had contacts throughout the legal and government systems who respected my work and my integrity. The prosecutor who'd be reviewing this case was Janet Martinez, no relation to Sheriff Martinez, a former law school classmate who'd called me for advice on constitutional issues more times than I could count. Emma was furious when she found out about the arrest, but her anger channeled into something productive. My tech-savvy daughter spent the afternoon deep diving into Brenda's online presence, uncovering a treasure trove of evidence I never could have found on my own. Screenshots of discriminatory Facebook posts, BBB complaints against her real estate company, city permit violations on projects she'd managed, all carefully preserved before Brenda could delete the evidence. "Dad, look at this," Emma said that evening, showing me her laptop screen. "She's got 17 Better Business Bureau complaints, and 3 different clients are suing her for breach of contract. Plus, I found her company's financial records in a public database. Want to guess who's been paying Tyler Manning for consulting services?" The pieces were falling into place like dominoes in an earthquake. Brenda's real estate company had been funneling money through the HOA landscaping contracts, creating a perfect little embezzlement scheme disguised as community improvement. The arrest wasn't just harassment, it was desperation. She was trying to silence the one person who had the knowledge and connections to expose her entire operation. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done playing defense. Time to use every tool in my legal arsenal to take down this corrupt little kingdom she'd built in suburbia. But first, I needed to let her dig her hole a little deeper. The best part about dealing with desperate criminals is that they always overplay their hand. And Brenda was about to overplay hers spectacularly. My home office transformed overnight from a quiet retirement space into a legal war room that would have made a Pentagon strategist jealous. Sarah rolled her wheelchair between stacks of documents, organizing everything with the methodical precision of someone who'd beaten cancer through sheer determination. Emma commandeered my laptop, creating digital evidence files while teaching her technologically challenged parents about cloud storage and screenshot preservation. Even Rex appointed himself official document guardian, lying protectively across boxes of papers like a furry paralegal. The first order of business was building an airtight case against Brenda's attorney. During my years on the bench, I'd seen plenty of lawyers push ethical boundaries, but Hamilton, Greystone & Associates had pole vaulted over them entirely. Their threatening letters showed clear conflict of interest. Representing both the HOA and Brenda personally created a textbook attorney-client privilege violation that would make law school professors weep with joy. I drafted a formal ethics complaint to the State Bar Association, complete with documented evidence of conflicting representation and improper fee arrangements. When sitting judges file bar complaints, they tend to get fast-tracked through the disciplinary process. Greystone's fancy letterhead wouldn't protect them from professional sanctions. Mrs. Chen proved to be worth her weight in legal gold. Her paralegal background meant she could navigate financial documents like a bloodhound following a scent trail. We spent 3 evenings at my kitchen table, surrounded by bank statements and invoices, while Sarah kept us fueled with coffee and her legendary snickerdoodles. "Look at this pattern," Mrs. Chen said, adjusting her reading glasses while pointing to a series of payments. Same vendor, same inflated amount, approved by Brenda alone without board votes. In my 40 years of paralegal work, I've never seen documentation this sloppy. The HOA's financial irregularities went back 4 years, but the Tyler Manning landscaping contracts were just the tip of the iceberg. Missing receipts for thousands in emergency repairs that never happened, vendor payments to companies that didn't exist, assessment increases that were never properly voted on by the membership. Brenda had treated the HOA treasury like her personal ATM. I remembered handling a similar case early in my career. A municipal official who embezzled through fake contractor payments. The audit process had revealed a simple truth. When someone steals community funds, they always leave a paper trail because they can't resist documenting their cleverness. Brenda's trail was wider than the Mississippi River. Emma's generation bridged our investigation in ways I never could have imagined. While Mrs. Chen and I wrestled with paper documents, Emma was building a digital fortress of evidence. She taught us about screenshot preservation, secure document sharing, and social media archiving that would hold up in court. "Dad, you won't believe what I found," Emma said one evening, showing me her laptop screen filled with Facebook posts. Brenda's been running a private group where she specifically targets families based on ethnicity and income level. I've got screenshots of her calling the Chen family's garden decorations culturally inappropriate and saying the Thompsons' children are disruptive to community standards. That's when I called my former colleague, civil rights attorney Janet Rodriguez, for a strategy session. Janet had spent her career fighting discrimination cases, and when I described Brenda's selective enforcement patterns, her response was immediate. "Marcus, this isn't just HOA mismanagement. This is a federal civil rights violation. Fair housing laws apply to HOAs just like they apply to landlords. If she's targeting residents based on race or ethnicity, she's looking at serious federal charges. We developed a multi-pronged approach that would hit Brenda from every possible angle. Criminal complaints for embezzlement and mail fraud, civil rights lawsuits for discriminatory enforcement, IRS whistleblower reports for unreported income, and state attorney general complaints for HOA financial mismanagement. It was legal warfare on multiple fronts, designed to overwhelm her limited resources and expose every aspect of her corrupt operation. The technical aspects required careful coordination. Mrs. Chen handled the forensic accounting, documenting every suspicious payment and missing receipt. Emma managed our digital evidence preservation, ensuring everything would be admissible in court. I prepared the legal filings, drawing on decades of experience with civil rights law and municipal governance. Sarah coordinated our community outreach despite her mobility challenges, and her genuine warmth created a stark contrast to Brenda's cold authoritarianism. Our house became the unofficial neighborhood headquarters, with residents stopping by regularly to share their own horror stories and evidence of harassment. Thompson, the blocked home buyer, turned out to be a former city councilman who understood exactly how corrupt officials operated. "I've seen this playbook before," he told us over coffee one afternoon. "They start with selective enforcement, escalate to financial manipulation, and always overreach when they feel threatened. Brenda's following the script perfectly." The counter-surveillance aspect was almost entertaining. Brenda drove past our house multiple times daily, clearly trying to figure out what we were planning. I installed security cameras with proper permits, documenting her increasingly erratic behavior. Rex developed a Pavlovian response to her BMW's engine sound, growling softly whenever she cruised by like a suburban stalker. By the end of the week, our evidence file could have choked a horse. Financial documents, audio recordings, witness statements, social media screenshots, and enough constitutional law precedents to fill a law library. We had everything needed to expose Brenda's entire operation and protect every family she'd targeted. The only question remaining was when and where to spring the trap. Brenda's reaction to our growing resistance was like watching a cornered animal, dangerous, unpredictable, and absolutely determined to take everyone down with her. She'd apparently realized that the neighborhood sentiment was shifting against her faster than a political scandal, and panic makes people do incredibly stupid things. The first sign of her desperation came on a windy Thursday morning when my solar panels mysteriously stopped generating power. I climbed up to investigate and found several mounting bolts loosened just enough to disrupt the electrical connections. Not weather damage, but deliberate sabotage disguised to look like storm aftermath. That night, I reviewed our new security camera footage and found something interesting. A figure in dark clothing moving around my roof area at 2:47 a.m., right when Rex had been barking his head off. The timestamp matched perfectly with Brenda's car leaving her driveway, though the footage wasn't clear enough for positive identification. Still, in my experience, when someone has motive, means, and opportunity, they're usually your culprit. Her smear campaign escalated beyond neighborhood gossip into outright character assassination. She started spreading rumors about my criminal record, conveniently forgetting that she'd orchestrated the arrest herself. Phone calls to homeowners' insurance companies followed, claiming my solar panels and ramp violated policy requirements and demanding coverage cancellations. The insurance angle was particularly nasty because it threatened our financial security during Sarah's ongoing recovery. Cancer treatment is expensive enough without adding insurance battles to the mix. But Brenda had made a critical error. Filing false reports with insurance companies is mail fraud, a federal offense that carries serious penalties. Her corruption was spreading like cancer through the community leadership. Bob Hendricks approached Mrs. Chen one afternoon with what he called a reasonable compromise. If she stopped supporting my troublemaking activities, her garden violation citations would magically disappear. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, recorded the entire conversation on her phone while pretending to consider his offer. "Think about it, Mrs. Chen," Bob said, his voice oozing false sincerity. "Why cause problems for yourself over someone else's battles? We just want a peaceful community where everyone follows the same rules." The recording was pure gold, documented evidence of quid pro quo corruption that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Bob had just confessed to selective enforcement based on political compliance, which violated about 17 different civil rights statutes. I filed a police report about the solar panel vandalism, though I suspected Sheriff Martinez's investigation would be thorough but ultimately inconclusive. The real value was creating an official record of escalating harassment that would support our larger case. Meanwhile, Brenda scheduled another emergency HOA meeting with the stated purpose of amending community bylaws to ban solar panels and exterior modifications retroactively. The legal absurdity was breathtaking. You can't retroactively outlaw legal improvements and demand immediate compliance without violating about 50 different constitutional principles. But the community response surprised everyone, including me. Emma organized carpools for elderly residents who couldn't drive at night. Sarah coordinated childcare for working parents who needed to attend. Thompson used his city council connections to ensure a legal observer would be present to document any procedural violations. 67 residents showed up, the largest HOA meeting attendance in Willowbrook's history. The community center was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and sitting on the floor. The energy in the room was electric with anticipation, like a crowd waiting for a championship boxing match. Brenda arrived looking haggard and defensive, clearly shocked by the turnout. Her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the desperate bravado of someone who knows they're about to lose everything but refuses to surrender gracefully. When I requested to see the official bylaws amendment process, the legal inadequacy of her proposal became immediately apparent. Constitutional amendments require 75% membership approval with proper notice periods. This meeting had been called illegally with insufficient notice, making any votes completely invalid. These procedures exist for everyone's protection, I explained to the packed room, drawing on decades of experience explaining constitutional law to juries. HOAs can't retroactively ban legal improvements any more than the government can retroactively criminalize activities that were legal when you did them. That's when Brenda completely lost her composure. Her professional mask slipped away like cheap paint in a rainstorm, revealing the petty tyrant underneath. She started screaming about troublemakers and property values, making thinly veiled threats about more arrests and lawsuits. "You people don't understand what you're destroying," she shrieked, her voice cracking with strain. "This community had standards before certain elements moved in and started demanding special treatment." The certain elements comment was caught on multiple phones, adding another layer of documented discrimination to our growing evidence file. Patricia Mills quietly distanced herself from the outburst, clearly recognizing a sinking ship when she saw one. I remained calm throughout her meltdown, speaking with the quiet authority that comes from knowing you hold all the winning cards. But Brenda wasn't finished. Her final desperate gambit would be the most vindictive yet, and it would finally give me the perfect opportunity to reveal exactly who she'd been messing with. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. Brenda's final desperate measures were like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Horrifying, destructive, and absolutely impossible to look away from. She'd partnered with her attorney to threaten mass litigation against anyone who'd opposed her, filing bogus complaints with the city against multiple residents while simultaneously trying to paint herself as the victim to local media. Her media strategy backfired spectacularly. The reporter she'd contacted, thinking he was getting a simple HOA maintains community standards story, started digging deeper when he realized the scope of complaints against Brenda. Mrs. Chen provided translated documents showing systematic harassment of immigrant families. 3 different residents shared recordings of discriminatory statements. What started as Brenda's PR victory lap turned into an investigation of her abuse of power. While the media attention was building, I was working behind the scenes on something much more significant. I'd filed formal complaints with the State Attorney General's office about financial mismanagement, submitted IRS whistleblower reports about unreported income, and coordinated with County Prosecutor Janet Martinez about potential fraud charges. The timing was perfect. Just as Brenda was trying to intimidate residents with legal threats, multiple law enforcement agencies were opening investigations into her activities. But Brenda's most vindictive move targeted the one thing that could push me over the edge, my family. The intimidation campaign expanded beyond legal threats into personal harassment that made my blood boil. Her boyfriend Tyler started driving slowly past our supporters' houses, taking photos and making notes. Anonymous flyers appeared overnight claiming I was a dangerous criminal who posed a threat to community safety. The breaking point came when they targeted Sarah's health. The stress of constant harassment triggered a minor medical episode that required an overnight hospital stay for observation. Nothing serious, thank God, but watching my wife, who'd already fought cancer and won, struggle with anxiety caused by neighborhood bullies made me absolutely furious. Emma posted an emotional Facebook update about bullies making my mom sick. and the community response was overwhelming. Flowers, casseroles, and cards of support flooded our house. Neighbors who'd stayed neutral suddenly chose sides when they saw a cancer survivor being attacked for advocating accessibility rights. That's when Brenda made her most catastrophic PR mistake. She commented on Emma's post, publicly blaming Sarah for creating unnecessary drama and suggesting that people who couldn't handle community standards should move somewhere else. The screenshot went viral in local Facebook groups within hours, cementing her reputation as someone who would attack a sick woman to maintain power. Her attorney abandoned ship faster than rats fleeing the Titanic. Greystone and Associates withdrew representation citing irreconcilable differences, though everyone knew it was really about unpaid bills and ethical liability. Brenda found herself without legal counsel just days before the town hall meeting that Thompson had organized to address community governance issues. Meanwhile, my surprise ally emerged from an unexpected source. County Prosecutor Janet Martinez, the same Janet who'd been my law school study partner 30 years ago, called to confirm that multiple criminal investigations had been opened into HOA financial irregularities. The timing couldn't have been better for maximum impact. "Marcus, I've been reviewing your complaint and this is textbook municipal corruption," Janet told me during a confidential phone call. "Embezzlement, mail fraud, civil rights violations. She's looking at serious federal charges if half of what you've documented is accurate." The town hall meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, with Mayor Jennifer Walsh moderating after community pressure made ignoring the situation politically impossible. Local TV station KXAN was covering the story as part of their HOA abuse investigative series. Brenda planned to make her final stand with a cut-rate attorney she'd found in the Yellow Pages. I spent Friday evening preparing my presentation like I was arguing before the Supreme Court. PowerPoint slides with financial evidence, legal documents organized for maximum impact, constitutional law citations translated for layperson understanding, and a timeline of violations that would destroy her credibility permanently. Sarah coordinated a potluck reception after the meeting, turning our resistance into a community celebration. Emma created the hashtag #WillowbrookTruth for social media documentation. Thompson arranged parking and accessibility for elderly residents. Mrs. Chen translated key documents for non-English speakers who'd been targeted by Brenda's discrimination. But Brenda had one final card to play. She'd hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me, hoping to find something she could use for last-minute character assassination. The PI discovered my judicial background, but instead of giving her ammunition, it handed me the perfect dramatic revelation for the town hall confrontation. Friday night, I sat in my home office reviewing my prepared remarks while the house hummed with quiet activity. Sarah was baking victory cookies, chocolate chip, my favorite. Emma was coordinating final social media strategy. Rex seemed to sense something big was coming, staying extra close and protective. Tomorrow would be the day Brenda Kessler learned exactly who she'd been messing with for the past 6 months, and I was going to enjoy every second of her education. The calm before the storm had never felt so satisfying. Saturday afternoon arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel possible. The community center was buzzing with energy as residents filed in, creating a crowd that spilled beyond the building's capacity. Standing room only doesn't begin to describe it. People were pressed against walls, sitting on windowsills, and craning their necks from the doorway. The local TV crew had arrived early, setting up cameras while their reporter interviewed early arrivals about systemic HOA abuse. Mayor Jennifer Walsh took her position at the podium, gavel ready, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. The political implications of this mess were obvious. Nobody wants to be the mayor who ignored community corruption, especially during an election year. I counted 127 residents in attendance, nearly 15% of the neighborhood. Thompson's allies from other districts had shown up for moral support. County Prosecutor Janet Martinez stood quietly in the back row, officially observing but really gathering evidence for her criminal investigation. The tension was electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Brenda arrived with her bargain basement attorney looking haggard and desperate. Gone was the confident HOA president who'd once measured mailbox heights with military precision. This woman looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her hands shaking slightly as she clutched a folder of hastily prepared notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Walsh began, "we're here to address serious concerns about HOA governance in Willowbrook Estates. Ms. Kessler, you requested to speak first." Brenda approached the podium like she was walking to her own execution. "Thank you, Mayor Walsh. I want everyone to know that I've been the victim of a coordinated harassment campaign designed to undermine legitimate community governance. Certain residents have used intimidation tactics and expensive lawyers to avoid following the same rules that apply to everyone else. Her voice cracked on expensive lawyers, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Her new attorney looked like he'd rather be defending parking tickets. These people, she continued, gesturing vaguely toward my section of the room, claim to support community values while undermining property standards that protect everyone's investments. They've filed frivolous complaints and spread malicious rumors to avoid accountability. When she finished her rambling defensive presentation, Mayor Walsh nodded toward me. Mr. Thornfield, you've requested time to respond. I stood slowly, carrying my thick folder of evidence like a prosecutor approaching the bench. The room went completely quiet, except for the soft whir of TV cameras capturing every moment. Thank you, Mayor Walsh. Before I address Ms. Kessler's allegations, I think everyone should understand exactly what we're dealing with here. I opened my folder and pulled out the first exhibit, bank statements showing Tyler Manning's landscaping payments. Over the past 2 years, the HOA has paid $47,000 to Manning Landscaping for emergency consultations. Mr. Manning is Miss Kessler's boyfriend, whose previous landscaping experience consisted of mowing his own lawn. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Brenda's face went pale as printer paper. These payments were approved without board votes, without competitive bidding, and without proper documentation. The invoices show no itemization, no project descriptions, and no oversight. This isn't community improvement. It's embezzlement disguised as landscaping. I pulled out the next exhibit, screenshots of Facebook posts. Ms. Kessler has also engaged in systematic discrimination against residents based on ethnicity and family composition. She's described immigrant families' cultural decorations as inappropriate and targeted families with children as disruptive to community standards. Brenda jumped up, her composure finally cracking completely. That's taken out of context. You can't just... Actually, I can, I said calmly, because selective enforcement based on race or ethnicity violates federal fair housing laws. And since you brought up expensive lawyers, let me clarify something important. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The perfect setup for my mic drop revelation. I haven't hired any lawyers, Miss Kessler, because I don't need to. You see, I'm not just some quiet retiree who fixes sprinkler systems. I paused, letting the silence build. I'm Marcus Thornfield, and I spent 23 years as a circuit court judge specializing in civil rights and municipal governance. I know HOA law better than most attorneys who claim to practice it. The room erupted. Cameras flashed, residents gasped, and Brenda looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Her bargain attorney was already packing his briefcase, clearly recognizing a lost cause when he saw one. Which brings us to the real issue, I continued, my voice carrying the authority of 2 decades on the bench. This isn't about solar panels or accessibility ramps. This is about constitutional rights, fair housing laws, and basic human decency. Ms. Kessler has violated federal embezzlement statutes, civil rights laws, and her fiduciary duty to this community. Janet Martinez stepped forward, identifying herself to the room. I'm County Prosecutor Janet Martinez, and I can confirm that multiple criminal investigations are currently underway based on evidence Mr. Thornfield has provided. We're looking at potential charges of embezzlement, mail fraud, and civil rights violations. Brenda's attorney was halfway to the exit before she realized he was abandoning her. The crowd began calling for her immediate removal from office, and Mayor Walsh called for an emergency vote of no confidence. The final tally: 119 votes for removal, 8 against. Brenda Kessler's reign of suburban terror was officially over. The aftermath of Brenda's spectacular public meltdown moved faster than wildfire through dry grass. Within a week, her real estate license was suspended, criminal charges were filed for embezzlement and civil rights violations, and the new interim HOA board had voted to refund every bogus fine to affected residents. The sound of justice being served never gets old. The legal resolutions fell into place like dominoes. My solar panels and accessibility ramp were officially approved retroactively, not that they'd ever needed approval in the first place. The HOA's insurance company paid for all legal fees and damages, recognizing that defending Brenda's actions would be throwing good money after bad. Hamilton Greystone and Associates faced bar disciplinary action that probably stung their fancy reputation more than any fine ever could. Sarah's health bloomed like springtime once the neighborhood stress evaporated. It's incredible how much energy you have for healing when you're not constantly fighting petty tyrants. The scent of her homemade bread filled our kitchen again as neighbors started dropping by for coffee and conversation instead of complaints and citations. Emma became our local activist hero, starting an HOA reform club at college while fielding interview requests from student newspapers. Rex went back to his peaceful routine of chasing squirrels and accepting belly rubs from grateful neighbors who no longer jumped every time they saw a clipboard. The community transformation was pure magic. Monthly potluck dinners replaced confrontational board meetings, filling the community center with laughter and the aroma of dozens of family recipes instead of tension and burnt coffee. Mrs. Chen's dumplings became legendary. Thompson organized game nights, and even Bob Hendricks started asking for organic gardening advice once he realized his chemical obsession was costing him friends. We established a community garden on previously unused HOA land, transforming Brenda's wasted emergency landscaping budget into something that actually fed families. The sound of children playing in yards where fear once ruled was sweeter than any symphony. Solar panels started appearing on rooftops throughout the neighborhood, like flowers blooming after rain. But the real victory stretched far beyond our little suburban drama. I established the Constitutional Rights Education Fund using settlement money from our civil rights lawsuit. The fund provides free legal education about HOA rights, partnering with law schools to create clinic programs helping other communities escape similar abuse. Sarah coordinated scholarship programs for disadvantaged law students, especially those passionate about civil rights and community advocacy. Watching her fierce dedication during our fight reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her 30 years ago. Cancer had tested her body, but only strengthened her incredible spirit. As for Brenda, she pleaded guilty to reduced charges and avoided prison, but paid $89,000 in restitution and penalties. She fled to another state where her reputation preceded her like a warning siren. Her story became a cautionary tale, proving that small-time corruption eventually catches everyone who thinks they're above accountability. 6 months later, Willowbrook property values had actually increased thanks to community harmony and the solar revolution Brenda had tried desperately to stop. The local newspaper featured us as a model sustainable community, and our Unity Festival became an annual celebration of the diversity she'd fought to suppress. The ripple effects exceeded my wildest dreams. My story spread through legal journals and community management publications, becoming a blueprint for HOA reform nationwide. Speaking requests flooded in from advocacy groups, and a New York publisher offered a book deal about constitutional rights in everyday life. Most satisfying of all, our state now requires constitutional rights training for all HOA board members, legislation I helped craft after testifying about abuse prevention. Basic concepts like fair housing and due process that should have been obvious apparently needed spelling out for power-hungry volunteers. These days, I teach part-time at the law school while Sarah has become our neighborhood's unofficial ambassador. Her accessibility ramp serves as mission control for community planning sessions, the warm wood still solid under her wheelchair wheels as children play in the yard around us. Remember this, your constitutional rights don't vanish when you buy a house in an HOA. Fair housing laws, due process protections, and basic human decency still apply, regardless of what clipboard-wielding tyrants might claim. Just last week, I got a call from Phoenix. "Judge, they're trying to foreclose on our house for displaying our cultural flag." I looked at Sarah, who smiled with that encouraging warmth I'd loved for decades. Retirement just got more interesting. Drop a comment sharing your own HOA nightmare story. You'd be amazed how many of us have battled petty tyrants like Brenda. And if this justice story fired you up, smash that subscribe button on HOA Tales because we've got more satisfaction coming that'll absolutely make your day.